The quest to ensure safe and secure environment in Nigeria is gaining momentum. Katsina State Governor Aminu Masari, in an interview on national television, disclosed that his government should never have negotiated with bandits, let alone grant them amnesty. The governor of the Northwest State also identified informants as the greatest challenge to the fight against insecurity in that part of the country. Masari also stated that plans are in motion to proscribe open grazing of cattle in Katsina State. He said once certain structures were put in place for ranching, nomadic herding will be outlawed. Tundu?
Well, I have a file in my mind, and I titled it, "It Seemed Like a Good Idea at the Time." That file is a lot more full than I care to admit. So I understand where Governor Masari is coming from. There's certain decisions that you make that do seem like a good idea at the time and prove not to be so great later. He was saying that the issue wasn't really with the amnesty per se. It was the lack of leadership within the bandits. We should stop calling them that because they're terrorists. But he was saying because they're not an ideological group, there's no real leader. Who are you actually negotiating with? So it makes it impossible to hold them to any terms that you have agreed to. And that's what he has realized in hindsight, which is 2020. Unfortunately, unlike in a personal situation, when you're a leader, your decisions affect countless lives. And that amnesty, we were all completely appalled. Not just the amnesty, the photo up with the AK-47. So it even showed, visually we could see the optics of it, were that the bandits were so emboldened even then. So it was quite clear that they were never going to desist. They were entirely too comfortable. The government was actually the one negotiating from a weaker hand. So we could all have seen this coming, unfortunately. And it has cost lives. It has cost property because all these people did was become more emboldened, more audacious, and here we still are today. But it's refreshing to hear a leader admit to error. You know they never do.
Yes.
You will never get any kind of apology. Instead, they'll give you some ridiculous apologia. Anything but an actual apology. So I'm actually quite impressed by that. Another thing that he said that I found very important was him casting the open grazing question as un-Islamic, which is also refreshing. We never hear that. The fact that really no true Muslim would go trampling on other people's territory. It's a peaceful religion. Muslims are supposed to be peaceful. So anybody that behaves like that is actually behaving in an un-Islamic way. And I hope that that is actually stressed a lot more, so that it's, because I'm sure that will convince people a lot more that look what you're doing, Allah will not be pleased. That message, I think, really needs to be stressed. And that he, even though he knows that a lot of the bandits are mostly Fulani, is still taking such a tough stance against them. That's another thing that sadly is refreshing here, because we do have, not just with banditry or terrorism or any other thing, corruption. Or don't touch her, she's our sister. Don't touch him, he's our brother. We do that in this country. So it's actually really refreshing to hear somebody say, these are my people, we speak the same language, but I cannot tolerate this behavior. This open grazing, it is a largely Fulani custom, but customs have to evolve. So that he's actually looking for ways to stop open grazing in his state and develop a structure for ranching is great news as far as I'm concerned.
Dr. Bati?
Well, Governor Aminu Masari of Katsina State, you recall that about a week ago, he said he was exercising powers conferred on him under Section 166, I think he quoted, of the 1999 Constitution. And on the basis of that, he issued what was known as an executive order. That executive order we criticize for the grammatical infelicities, but he made very concrete points as part of his attempt as the chief security officer in the state to deal with the challenge of banditry, kidnapping that had clearly overwhelmed Katsina State, as is the case also in some other states in that part of the country. And one of the things he did was to ban livestock markets, to suspend livestock markets, to stop, to shut down the Jibia-Gumbri road, and he directed that anybody who wanted to use that particular road should use the Funtua road. He banned the sale of second-hand motorcycles. He banned, 3 persons being carried on just one motorcycle, and a number of other measures as a way of dealing with the security challenge in the state. And now, barely a week later, we have the same governor making some very far-reaching statements. First, let us commend him for his forthrightness. In drama, in tragic plays, it is called anagnorisis. that moment of awareness, when a man who is faced with a difficult situation suddenly realizes that, oh, he had made a mistake. And in that moment of anagnosis, he will say a number of truths about his condition. And what Governor Masari has said is that, one, negotiation with bandits does not help. He described them as persons who are criminals, thieves, bandits, without any ideological leaning. So he has set out to clear the air as to whether the kind of persons he identified with were persons who could actually be reformed or not. And he says that they should be described for what they are. You know, when he and one or two other governors engaged in that negotiation with the bandits, as they were called, at the end of the day, Governor Masari was disappointed, and he cancelled that program. He says he does not regret what he did, but that he shouldn't have negotiated. Well, he needs to be reminded that what he has done amounts to an expression of regret. In fact, he should have gone ahead perhaps to offer an apology. And he's also opposed to the idea of amnesty for terrorists. And I think that there are many people, you know, who are in the same boat with him in that regard, that these persons do not deserve amnesty. If they have committed a crime, they should do the time. Then he went on, which is something very sensitive, to say that majority of these people are Fulanis, including the ones who come from other parts of West Africa, from Libya and the Sahel region. And he said, look, he's also Fulani, but he has to say the truth. For that reason, I think he's been attacked by Miyetti Allah Kautalhore, because, you know, there are two different groups going by the name Miyetti Allah. And the man speaking for Miyetti Allah Kautalhore is the National Secretary of the group, Salih Al-Hassan, that's his name, who has been quoted as saying that everybody should disregard what Governor Masari said. He described him as a drunkard. He described him as a confused governor. He described him as the worst governor that Katsina has ever had, who is just interested in security votes. Well, that may be Salih Hassan's opinion, and maybe if the governor will challenge him to defend that opinion. But what is clear is that Governor Masari has raised quite a number of issues that can, further expand the conversation around banditry and terrorism in Nigeria. The one that is entirely new on me is when he said that open grazing is un-Islamic, because if you have cattle, you shouldn't go and allow it to disturb other people's farmlands. It's quite interesting to hear that, but it's just pure common sense. Even in our laws, trespass is not allowed. And if you trespass onto other people's land, you have strict liability to make sure that your possession does not escape to disturb your neighbor. So he says he will build ranches. Well, other governors in the north are also doing that. He has stopped the transportation of cattle from the state to any other part of the country. Kaduna State governor has done the same thing. Some other governors have done the same thing. So maybe if there is this open conversation, we will be able to get to a point where we are all on the same page as to the difference between personal business and public policy.
Will this go down as another moment of epiphany in our national life? Time will tell. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Rotu Sodiri, Michael Wilson, Adesu Amoro, Aaron Akerjala to give us updates on Africa, global business and sports activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rotus Adiri is right here to give us an African business update.
Yes, I am. It's good to be in here with you guys. Good morning. Good morning. So very quickly, the central bank's head of the monetary policy department, Mr. Hassan Mahmoud, was at an investor forum saying that right now the central bank is focused not necessarily on valuation of the naira, but the FX supply. And he said that this is necessary because of the fact that, we know what's been going on. The need for the central bank dollar rationing in order to try to get FX to as many outposts as possible. We can blame, of course, the OPEC cuts on supply for each of OPEC members that have affected how much FX earnings that the country can make. And so he kept emphasizing, he talked about, speculators and so on and so forth. So I guess, we've discussed this several times. At this point, I think the conversation of addressing Nigeria's FX supply issues really has to focus on something that, Rufai, you've talked about, quality of exports. Tundu last week was talking about, sending children overseas, viewing it as a mother versus an economist looking at FX supply. Okay, look, last week you had, or 2 weeks ago, you had a representative from Samsung, right? Doctor asked him a very interesting, a funny question where he said, your phone costs as much as land that I can buy in my village. Why should I buy your phone? That's Samsung's Korea, yeah? It's a Korean company here in this country selling technology that earns FX, right? So what would it take for Nigeria to do the same thing, to manufacture phones that can be sold elsewhere? Apple is, I think the iPhone 13 is coming out next week. People here are going to rush to go and buy it. The CBN can give financing to a manufacturer to make phones in the same way they've done the same with Anchor Borrowers program. But the CBN cannot give you power to make sure that your phones can be manufactured. They can't give you security to make sure that your facilities where you're making those phones are properly secured and safe from robbery. So the fiscal side of the equation here, same thing with agriculture. You can do the Anchor Borrowers program, you can finance farmers, but the routes to markets, the roads, the storage facilities for farming products, whose job is it to be able to get that sorted out? So the conversation around FX supply at this point is a needed conversation, but Nigeria's quality of exports, varied export options, that just has to increase for this situation to get better. Electronic voting, Dr. wrote, I encourage all our viewers to read an article that Dr. wrote on electronic voting in Kaduna, where he wrote about the fact that the local government elections, yes, the numbers were low, voting, the folks that came out to vote were low, but they engaged telco companies in order to make sure that the internet bandwidth and so on was working. They addressed the issues that they faced in the last time Kaduna had electronic voting in 2018. And again, I talked on the show about taking money out of an ATM with your fingerprint. If the banking sector can secure the ability for me not to take somebody else's finger and go to an ATM to take out money, can this not be translated over to technology getting us to where we need to be with e-voting?
Well, still on Dr. Abati's article, I completely agree with you. Yes, it was great. But it's important to really throw this challenge to the government. Dr. Abati called out the National Assembly for their inaction. We can see what has happened in Kaduna. This is not rocket science. It's actually a deliberate attempt to thwart our democracy, and we have to phrase it in no other way. That's exactly what it is. It's possible, and you gave your kudos to Governor Rufai, deservedly so. I'm sure you want to say more.
Yes, well, what we have seen in Kaduna State was the first state in Nigeria to try electronic voting in 2018. In 2018, there were issues. There were challenges that were identified. There were reports of multiple voting. But in spite of that, the governor was resolute. He said he would try it again. And he announced that in the local government elections of September 4, electronic voting will again, be adopted in Kaduna State. And if you place it in context, it accentuates that controversy in the National Assembly, in the two chambers, about Section 52, subsection 2, and Section 52, subsection 3 of the proposed Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2021. But the politics around that. Some of the lawmakers conveniently, excused themselves. It was a time, that critical moment when the Assembly was to vote on electronic transmission of results, that they excused themselves. And all that controversy about INEC saying that, look, you could do it. It will work. It had already started experimenting with it. And the telecoms saying that, well, they cannot dictate to political authorities, but that if they were given the chance, they will do it. Now, some of those excuses given by the National Assembly at the time have been cleared with the successful completion of the local government election in Kaduna State. What Kaduna State has done is to demonstrate that this is doable and it's achievable. They've done it in Namibia. In Kaduna State, they've tried it twice. This exercise on September 4 was an improvement on what happened in 2018. And it's on the basis of that that I argue that, look, it's not enough for some politicians, out of their own fears, to say we cannot do electronic voting. They do it in New Zealand, in Canada, in the UK. Some countries are even beginning to experiment with internet voting. You know, so, I mean, we just have to move forward to check issues of fraud in elections, because you can't just steal the electronic box and say you want to go and stuff. And from what we saw in Kaduna, it was very fast. Where they stole 11 boxes, but that made no difference.
They gave it a go.
They gave it a go, exactly. Well said, Doctor, well said.
All right,
Fine.
okay. So, Rotus, we still need to go back to this foreign exchange palaver.
Right, the FX.
We need to make foreign exchange. How do we make foreign exchange? We need to produce. The height of Nigeria's growth, the good old days, like people say, the 70s, was not because Nigeria had only crude oil revenue, but we had factories, we had industries. Close to 10% of the GDP of this country came from manufacturing. We churned out produce. We had the lace factories in Ogun State and some other parts of the country that churned out lace to other parts of Africa that we got forex from, that even exported lace. I remember they used to make Swiss voile lace or something in Ayekwe, Astro. That was the company. It was a partnership between Sokas and an Austrian company. We had those products. Where are those products today? How many made in Nigeria stuff do you see today? Nowhere. And I'll give you an instance. PlayStation 4, made out of Japan. PlayStation 4, a unit costs $339.
There's a 5 now.
There's a 5 now. Mm-hmm. I'm just benchmarking for 4.
Right. I got
a
you,
unit costs $39.
Yeah.
And guess what? 116 million units have been shipped out of Japan.
Right.
$339 times 116 million units is $39 billion.
Off a video game.
Just off a video game.
Right.
And with the PS5, that clamor is there.
And
the demand is there.
And the PS5 has shipped 10 million units now.
Right.
And that costs over $500. So, from PlayStation alone, Japan is getting about $39 billion in forex. Do you know how much that is?
Right.
That's our
reserves. It's higher than our reserves.
It's higher than our federal reserve.
It's higher than our budget.
So we're kidding.
Right.
We're playing Chucky hopscotch.
And there's no reason why we can't
That's
manufacture
the same Japan that in 1960 was said to, in fact, likely to be at the same level with Nigeria
back in
the
1960.
future, because
Exactly.
Nigeria was slightly ahead. Who gave that information?
Yes.
That was from former Emir of Kano.
Correct.
Lamido Sanusi.
Correct.
In one of his last, major.
When he said when he was born back in 60 years ago, when he was born, foreign investors were saying Nigeria was preferable to Japan.
We will be ahead of Japan.
Yeah.
And here today we're not there. But at a point in this country, we were at that level. But all the factories that used to carry people to work and back and presented Nigeria in the 80s, the 70s and 80s as a productive country, all those factories have become churches. So this is the tragedy of the Nigerian state, because you can't talk about forex in isolation.
Right.
Your economy must function. You must be productive. You shouldn't be a nation of consumers. The last trade data that was released by
The Bureau of Statistics.
by the Bureau of Statistics, both in terms of imports and exports. I mean, the thing was not working. You see that our trade balance data is ridiculous. So unless you address those basic things, you can't just keep talking about, some other items in isolation.
Right.
Oh dear. Well, thank you, Rotus.
Thank you so much.
Moving on now to somebody who is not here. Michael Wilson joins us from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Morning. It's been a bit of a slow and depressing comeback from the United States in the trading day yesterday. They came back from holiday on Labor Day on Monday, and it's taken the markets down, unsurprisingly, given that there's going to be huge debt overhang in the United States one way or the other, and big infrastructure bills to come in, so nobody's very surprised about that. So that's the overall view. As far as Asia's concerned, uninspiring Wall Street and also performance, and also falling commodity prices weighed heavily on Asian markets. The exception, though, Japan and China both getting little gains, but not a lot. China markets given back most of their early gains. Could be that the New York malaise is having a delayed impact after China rallied impressively, as you know, on Monday and Tuesday. So as far as the US is concerned, the market's rotated into what's seen now, this is strange, isn't it, for these kind of times, the perceived safety of big tech stocks push the S&P, Dow Jones lower, Nasdaq steady. Here's some company news. PayPal is going to buy the Japanese buy now, pay later firm Payday for $2.7 billion. It's largely a cash deal. It's being seen as a part of the pandemic boom, really, and it follows Australia being their giant Afterpay service being bought by Square Inc. A little bit of a while ago. Bitcoin's tumbled again. Now, you remember we talked about El Salvador adopting it as legal currency. Well, they have. Unfortunately, the price, although it was $52,000, it's fallen quite considerably. The problem with Bitcoin, down about 16% in El Salvador, is the obvious one, which of course is that most of the population, and I mean most of the population, do not have any access to it at all because they're not connected to the internet. So crypto-adjacent stocks like MicroStrategy and Coinbase also fell as well. And it looks like transaction fees and technical glitches and all the rest of it are getting way ahead of what El Salvador wanted to do with it. Back domestically to the UK, big tax rises promised yesterday. They indeed happened. £12 billion manifesto breaking pledge to increase spending on healthcare. It sounds very, very good indeed. Taxes now 35% of GDP in this country, the highest since 1950. The critics of it are saying it's a tax on jobs. Certainly a lot of large business bosses have said that, and they're absolutely right. Of course it's a big tax on jobs, and it shows the leftward tilt of the UK as we speak into socialism, basically. Those supply problems are going to hit Christmas shelves. There might be a lot of rather sad kiddies at Christmas. High shipping costs, commodity inflation, problems sourcing things and all the rest of it, constrained factory capacity, retailers brace for a shortage of stock. UK Megits, now there's the engineering company, subject of this massive takeover fight at the moment. Shares have gone down. TransDime have pulled out. It's dumped its $7 billion, £900 a share offer for it. The shares actually have fallen to below the bid price of the shares for Parker Hannifin, the US rival, which is still in the fight for it. Now, there are a number of people that may intervene in this still, including the UK Business Secretary and also the EU, because of supply chain positions that Megit is involved in as far as Airbus is concerned. As far as commodities are concerned, oil falling on a stronger dollar. It was tough for trading for all commodities, as I was mentioning. Aluminium giving back much of its Guinea gains. We were talking about that very, very briefly yesterday, weren't we? Said it was fairly volatile, so it's proved to be. And growth concerns as well. And gold has also tumbled on US dollar strength. I suspect that will probably last for the week now. Nothing much coming in to push things around. That's the global view.
Well, Michael, I think you've been vindicated in El Salvador, because on the question of cryptocurrency, you've always been consistent in saying that it's volatile. And that volatility was demonstrated with the chaos that we witnessed in El Salvador yesterday. President Bukele refused to listen to informed advice from the IMF, from the World Bank, and from others. And so Bitcoin tumbled from about 52,000 to less than 43,000. And that caused a big problem. The economy lost over $3 million first day of trial. And it turned out to be a very bad day for the government of Bukele, with over 1,000 protesters going to the Supreme Court and to the Legislative Assembly, setting up bonfires and rejecting Bitcoin. Well, would this be enough justification for Bukele to just cover his tracks and pull down the Chivo, as that digital wallet is called, in El Salvador? Secondly, in England, in the UK, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, unveiled this new 1.25 percentage points increase in insurance to provide the funding up to about £36 billion for healthcare and social care. Well, is this not a dangerous gamble? Would this not turn core conservative voters against the government? And can the Tory party still be able to say, oh, it's the party of low tax? And isn't this an attack on the average person in the United Kingdom who are going to bear the brunt. At the end of this month, the furlough scheme is going to end. Even the pension tree lock has been more or less, affected. Two major campaign promises are violated. Do you think that Prime Minister Boris Johnson will get away with this?
I do, and I'll tell you why as well. All the reasons you say are absolutely correct. However, if you go up to people in the street and you ask them the question, and in private, you get them to poll on whether they would like the NHS to have more money spent on it, most people would say absolutely yes. I think it's completely wrong, but you cannot say that as a politician. You dare not say anything against free healthcare, which has been part of the tradition of this country since the end of the Second World War. It is absolutely impossible to argue against. You can say what you like about money being wasted, which it is. I know because I worked in it when I was very much younger, just having left university. It is exactly the same as it is now. There's no control over spending. There's no control over delivery. There's no control over social care. And yet the government is doing this because it's positioning itself. It's seeing as the party of the NHS. That's what it's calling itself now. So it leaves Labour, which you would normally think as being the party of social care and social services and so on, with nowhere to go on this. They then argue against it because the Tories the Conservatives would just say, well, all right then, we won't do that. We won't have tax cuts. We couldn't do anything about the pandemic. What would you have done? This is the problem. So you're absolutely right. Will it be a tax on growth? Yes, I think it probably will. Is it unfair? Yes, of course it's unfair. Nobody likes taxes. Nobody likes taxes going up. But if you have an emergency, do you have one of the finest services that come and pulls you out of that, never mind the administrative chaos then on? The answer to that question is yes, you do. And that's really what we're paying for. But you're absolutely right. Everything you say is correct. It is a big, big turning point in the way this country is actually going right now. And the Conservatives can no longer say they're the party of lower taxes and pro-business. And we're going to hear a lot more about this in the coming days, particularly from business leaders. But Johnson feels safe because he's seen what the polls say. He knows that within himself that the public will support this, even though they will grumble about it. It's a political gamble which will happen.
Well, El Salvador, if we still have time.
Ah, yes, El Salvador. Well, what do you want to debate the sensible policies of El Salvador? I don't think so. We got a president who wears a baseball cap facing backwards because he thinks it's trendy and suddenly wants to have Bitcoin as legal currency. It can do, but you can only have Bitcoin as legal currency if the majority of people have access to it, and they don't. So what else is there to say? Of course people are cross about it. Of course people take to the streets. They would do because it's effectively turned this into a banana republic.
All right, there are many things to unpack as regards El Salvador, Michael. The truth is, the problem is not Bitcoin, but the fact is El Salvador has no infrastructure in place. And Bukele went ahead with that. No internet, in fact, in El Salvador. No proper internet across the country, and you want to have Bitcoin and the likes. So I think he should fix his problems and stop the show button. And for me, it's quite sad that the Conservative Party, just because of politics and they want to stay on in the position of the Prime Minister, will pretty much take on a Labour policy and act it out. The world is coming to an end.
Are you surprised when Margaret Thatcher said her greatest legacy was Tony Blair? They all shape-shift as it suits them.
The world is coming to an end.
I don't think the world's coming to an end. I think we'll be here tomorrow. I don't think the world is coming to an end. I think there's a lot of vigorous discussion, but I will be here tomorrow and you will be here tomorrow. The world is not coming to an end.
Okay, Michael, thank you so much. That's very spirited. Thank you so much. We'll go for updates on COVID-19 pandemic, and this one, Moro joins us now. And this one, great to have you.
Good morning, guys. Good morning, Rufai, Dr. Bati, and Tunjum.
Morning.
Great to be here again.
Yeah.
Morning. Well, COVID-19 has killed more than 4.5 million people, according to the Johns Hopkins University tally, and infected over 221 million others. But while we continue to see a two-track pandemic, that's the pandemic of the vaccinated and unvaccinated, we're beginning to see countries take stricter measures to curb or keep the virus at bay. For instance, in Vietnam, a 28-year-old man has been jailed for 5 years for breaking the COVID-19 quarantine rules and spreading the virus in the country. But let's take a look at what's going on the African continent. The number of COVID-19 cases confirmed in Africa has reached 7.92 million in Africa. If we can have the data up. And fatalities also crossed another green milestone of 200,000 deaths, while some 7,130 patients, 7,130,000 patients across the continent have recovered from the disease so far, according to the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Africa CDC. Now, I want to tell you about the breakdown of regions in terms of caseload. If you look at that bar chart you have on your screen, the second one, actually, okay, we could keep it on this one. The caseload shows that Southern Africa, indicated in the gray bar, which is the longest bar on the right-hand side of your screen, is the tallest bar in that chart. That's the Southern Africa. It shows that they have the highest caseload. It's the most affected region on the continent, followed by the northern and eastern parts of the continent, indicated in gold and burgundy, while Central Africa, which is in green, is the least affected region on the continent. In West Africa, which is the black, Nigeria has the highest figures of cases and deaths. Now, we can take the second graph to show that Nigeria has the most cases and deaths in West Africa. That's followed by Ghana. However, the continent, unfortunately, has fully vaccinated only 2.7% of its population. Let's come to Nigeria, guys. Lagos, again, posted almost half of the latest official 597 infections from across the country in the last 24 hours in Nigeria. This was followed quickly by Rivers and Edo states. The country also recorded, unfortunately, 17 COVID-19 related deaths in Nigeria. When I bring the statistics every morning, it's more than the numbers. It's about people, it's about lives, it's about people's loved ones, it's about businesses affected, communities affected. So we should look at this beyond the numbers I bring to you every morning. And still in Nigeria, at its weekly briefing, the NPHCDA revealed that Nigeria has taken delivery of more COVID-19 vaccines. The NPHCDA boss, Dr. Faisal Shraib, who gave the briefing, says over 1.1 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine purchased by the Nigerian government, actually bought through the AVAT platform, arrived over the weekend and are currently being analyzed by the country's Food and Drug Administration Agency, NAFDAC. This is just as over 3 million Nigerians, he says, have been vaccinated so far by either the Moderna or AstraZeneca vaccine. He also disclosed that the agency has now introduced, listen to this, a special exercise that would enable members of staff and retirees of public and private sector firms to be vaccinated in their office premises at absolutely no cost. He also spoke on the recognition of Covishield, which is the AstraZeneca produced in India by countries. He says the WHO and the African Center for Disease Control are working hard to ensure that more countries recognize this vaccine. And finally, to Zimbabwe, where I can tell you that thousands of workers in the country risk being sacked if they refuse to get vaccinated. And that's according to the Justice Minister of the country. Zimbabwe is his name. He says Zimbabweans will not be forced to get vaccinated. However, those in public service, he says, have a responsibility to protect the public by getting COVID-19 shots. I can tell you that the vaccine mandate has not gone down well with Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, which is an amalgamation of 35 labor unions representing over 189,000 people. The trade union is suing the government and 6 other companies, accusing them of infringing on workers' rights. Guys,
I just can never understand why people are so resistant to an approved vaccine anyway. Dr. Faisal Schreib's address was very interesting, especially the part about Covishield and that issue of documentation being the issue with certain countries not recognizing it rather than quality. And it's always very interesting to see that stress because some people do believe that in Nigeria we were sold a second-hand vaccine, which is simply not the case, is it?
Well, I think Dr.
It
Faisal
is not.
also raised a number of interesting issues. Again, he addressed the conspiracy theories and said people should be wary of these conspiracy theories. Two, he addressed the concern of Nigerians who travel to the UK and are required, even when they've been fully vaccinated, to quarantine for 14 days. And he said, well, Nigeria does the same thing to travelers from the UK. And he made a distinction between countries that are, that have green light or they have amber, they are classified as amber or as red zones. And he made a point about reciprocity, which I think is very important. In situ vaccination, as he calls it, which provides ministries, departments, and agencies to apply freely, to vaccinate their workers in their offices and also the private sector. I think that is also a very good development. But if you look at the breakdown of the rate of vaccination that he gave, over 3 million persons have at least received at least one dose. Only about 1.5 million, have been fully vaccinated nationwide. Now that figure is small, but the only consolation is that we have already paid for about 39 million doses of vaccines from the Johnson & Johnson under the AVAT, project led by the African Union. So, but I like the idea of the weekly briefing. So the MPACDA, led by Dr. Faisal Shaib, and also in Lagos State, we have Professor Akin Abayomi, informing the people almost on a weekly basis. I think that's an example that other states should emulate. But the basic problem in Africa is one of infrastructure. Zimbabwe has paid for 12 million doses of vaccine from China, right? The population of the country itself is 15 million. It has succeeded in only vaccinating about 2.7 million persons. But the big concern, which Justice Minister Ziyambi did not address, is that, look, there is shortage of staff. And then when you go to these vaccination centers in Zimbabwe, you find a long queue. People go as early as very early morning, and yet they may not get vaccinated. But he says, as you pointed out, that yes, public servants have an obligation, a responsibility to take the jab in order to protect others from danger.
All right. That's about all, I guess. I don't think we still have any more time. But thank you so much for your time, as always, at this one.